I veckans avsnitt av Mediekorridoren. Israel ser ut att ha vunnit kriget mot Hamas, men förlorat Mediekriget. Trots de fruktansvärda bilderna från Hamas terrorattack den 7 oktober har Israel inte lyckats få ut sin egen berättelse i medierna. Vad är det i Hamas kommunikationsstrategi som Israel inte har lyckats matcha? I studion Israels ambassadör i Sverige, Ziv Kulman, journalisten och författaren Bengt G Nilsson och komikern och poddaren Aron Flam. Medierapportering är vårt fönster mot omvärlden. Den rapportering vi tar del av formar vår bild av verkligheten. Det är därför vi gör Mediekorridoren. Ett program där vi granskar och kommenterar agendadriven journalistik, slagsidor och dolda agendor. Och idag diskuterar vi hur de traditionella medierna skött rapporteringen av kriget mellan Hamas och Israel. För detta ändamål har vi Israels ambassadör med oss här i studion nu. Ziv Kulman, welcome to 100%.
Hey, thanks for having me on 100%.
We've all seen the horrific images from October 7th, and there is even more of that sort of material. Yet this side of the story, the atrocities, has almost seemed to disappear from sort of the media reporting of this issue. Do you agree with that notion, and why is it so?
It's a very important question that you're asking me, and in order to understand the answer, which I'm not sure I fully have, one has to understand what sets us apart from Hamas and the other terrorist organizations that are calling for our destruction. We don't use our dead as propaganda. This is against Jewish moral, and it's not something that we do. You know, we're talking about very graphic material. In order to use it, we need to have the consent of the families.
Very few seem to remember those images and what actually took place. When they're commenting on the war, they tend to point to Israel as the aggressor. Do you recognize this sentiment?
So that is correct. People tend to move on, to forget, to say, yes, what happened on October 7th was atrocious, but, and then they move on. And it's difficult, first of all, to remind them what we endured and what we're fighting against. And also if people tell us, yes, we saw it and we condemned it, but now we have to focus on the suffering of the Palestinian side. We have to remind everyone that Israeli hostages were kept in brutal conditions for over 2 years.
Even as the media broadcast the images of this starved young man in the
Eviatar
tunnels.
David,
yes,
hostage.
Horrific images. A lot of the Western media reported this as maybe this will put more pressure on Israel to navigate a peace. Isn't this getting the whole thing backwards?
Absolutely. It's important to remember how it started. And, you know, the hostage deal shows how easily it can end. You know, if Hamas releases all the hostages as we speak.
What is the biggest current source of disinformation in the West? Because is it a propaganda war as well?
There are many sources of disinformation. You know, it could come from social media. It could come from traditional media. It is when people don't check their sources, when people are quick to blame Israel. I can give you several examples. I can talk about, the case on October 17th. We're talking 10 days after the October 7th massacre. You know that 25% of the missiles that were shot at Israel by Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other terrorist organizations ran short. And they hit their own people. So a hospital was hit. Hamas immediately said 500 people burned in a hospital. The international media was so quick to report it, just to show that actually, after checking the facts, that actually it was a missile hit by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and it is the Palestinian missile that ran short and killed its own people. And that is just one example.
Well, there is the obvious situation in a war, obviously. People will try to manipulate the storyline to fit their own agenda. But I'd like to show you a video clip. If we can we get this running on the screen?
4 mass graves containing, local search teams say, hundreds of bodies have now been dug up at Shifa, prompting international calls for an investigation into possible war crimes.
But the committee argues that the broadcaster knew that Palestinians were burying their dead at these sites before the Israeli raids. Several months earlier, the BBC itself reported on Palestinians digging mass graves, and geolocation clearly places the two burial sites in roughly the same area.
So this is from the current BBC scandal in the UK. Well, do you have a comment on what's going on there?
It's shocking. It's sad that it's always easy to blame Israel for anything that happens. You find a burial site, oh, these must be war crimes. You see a suffering Palestinian child, this must be because of Israel. You have to remember that there are so many actors on the ground. First of all, Hamas. I mean, the Palestinian people are the first victims of Hamas brutality. There is the international community, aid organizations that are not always doing their job. And of course, there's Israel that has responsibilities under international law. I mean, remember, this is not normal warfare. This is Israel, a democracy that abides international law, that has to abide to conventions, and Hamas, a terrorist organization.
And this has become quite a scandal because according to the documents presented by the Telegraph, they knew, the journalists at the BBC, they knew that these graves had not been dug by Israeli soldiers, but they had already been dug by Palestinians. Even so, they went forth and put out this information, not just once, but several times to the public. Why do you think they're doing it like that, and what is the consequence?
Well, obviously, this is a question you have to ask journalists who are not doing their job, or that are doing their job in a fake or false or biased way. This is obviously something that one needs to ask them. And I think we live in democracies. We understand the importance of press, of free press, of information. I think it's very important that we know that we can trust the media outlets that we are watching, that we are reading, that we're consuming.
In the light of this, do you think we can?
That's a question that perhaps the British taxpayers need to ask themselves. But in our discussion, I think it's important that we rely on facts, that the reporting is impartial. And this is how societies, how people in democracies like Sweden, like Israel, must get their information.
If we turn the tables and look at what is Hamas doing in terms of communication that Israel has not been able to match, why is the Hamas narrative so dominant in the West?
Hamas uses propaganda. It lies. It uses its own people not only as human shields. We're protecting our civilians. Hamas is hiding behind the civilians, hiding behind them, using them as shields, and then complaining to the entire world, oh, look what Israel is doing to us. Hamas is using propaganda. Hamas is using false images. Hamas is orchestrating campaigns as if Israel is deliberately doing that or deliberately doing something else. It is a very unbalanced, as I mentioned, it's a very unbalanced warfare, because it's a terrorist organization that can get away with anything it says or does, whereas Israel is a democracy, and when a democracy fights a terrorist organization within the limits of democracy, international law, it's as if you're fighting a battle with at least with your one arm tied behind your back.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us at 100%.
Tack så mycket.
Ja, och vi har alltså precis tittat på intervjun med Ziv Kulman. Med mig här i studion för att kommentera på detta har jag Bengt G Nilsson, journalist och författare till Israel och hennes fiender. Välkommen till 100%.
Tackar.
Och Aron Flam som är dekonstruktiv kritikproducent, poddare och komiker. Välkommen hit Aron Flam.
Tack så mycket.
Jag börjar med att vända mig till dig.